Custom states are really useful when you want to temporarily store some information on the page and not in the database. I would say that states are probably one of the most widely used pieces of functionality within any application. Let me show you what I mean. So I've set up a quick admin dashboard, and what we're going to do is set up some navigation states to show and hide different groups on the page based on clicking on these menu items. We're going to set up a state to be able to filter various people by team. And we're going to set up a state to apply a list of users to a project. Let's start with creating a toggle menu to then filter out the various team members. So in the database, we have a user, and a user belongs to a team. What we're going to do is display the teams in a repeating group. Here are the teams here. And these teams have a list of users. So in this repeating group, what I'm doing is just searching for all the teams. Let's actually sort starting with A. And let's drop in a button in the cell. Because we can see the shape of the button, we don't need the separator. So I'm going to remove the style in the repeating group. Set that to none. Okay, now we're making a selection. So actually, the button should probably be a gray color when it's deselected with black text. I might make this background slightly lighter. And this is set to the current cell's team's name. So if we refresh the page, and what we want to happen is when we click on these buttons, for instance, brand turns to green, stays green, and we just see the people that belong to the brand team. What I'm going to do is change the conditional for the moment. Okay, let's run through the workflow to set the state of a particular team. Now, if we start edit the workflow, we'll go down to element actions and set state. Okay, it's asking you to attach a state to an element. We can attach states to any elements on the page. We can do it to the button, we can do it to the repeating group. But actually, the best way to do it is to set all your states on the page, because later on when you have lots of states that you need to edit, you'll know where to find them. So my page name is called states for my demonstration. Here we can see it's called states. So first of all, I'm going to set the state to the state element, which is the page. Now it's saying what type of state do you want to set. So we create a new custom state. Now it is a team. That is a repeating group of teams. When we click the button, we're clicking on a team. So we go find team. There it is there. Okay, we're just selecting one team at a time, so we're going to leave that unchecked. State name is team. This is just for our reference. Be nice and descriptive. We're just setting a team. And we have to set the value. The value is the current cell's team. The beauty of working with repeating groups is that you can always access the current cell's team or the current cell's user. So now we've created a state. And what exactly have we done? What we are doing is at page level in the user's browser, we temporarily making a selection and storing that selection in the page. It's invisible, you can't see it, but we can use that to apply functionality. We can change the button to a green because we've made the selection. We can filter repeating groups. Let's change the button to green when we click on the particular teams. So on the conditionals tab, we're going to say, we're going to find the state first. Where is it? It's at page level. Our page is called state. Now it reveals the state that you created earlier. Remember, we called it team. When the state's team is current cell's team, which it is because we're clicking in that current cell, when that matches, then change font color to white, and then change the background to green. So we click the button, we set the state of the particular cell we're clicking in, and then we tell the button that when that state exists, when we've made that selection, then change the color. So that's feedback to the user that they know confidently that they have selected that team. So we can select marketing or HR, sales. Okay, how else can we access that state? Let me just show you with a piece of text. Again, where is the state? It's at page level. And the page is called states at the bottom. The state is called team. And that team, what is its name? Well, that's dynamic. So that actually should turn up when we click these, HR, brand, marketing. So as you can see, states are invisible, but it allows us to store temporary information. If I refresh the page, it disappears. Okay. What about filtering this based on the state? So what we'll do is, in repeating group user, currently I'm searching for users. I don't have any constraints. And this is when we'll create a new constraint called team. So team has to match the team state we created. So when that equals the page called state and the state called team, then show those users that belongs to that team. So brand, HR, marketing, sales, and social media. So this is a very powerful feature. As you can see, it runs very quickly. But when we refresh the page, nothing. Now, there is something I wanted to show you that pertains to having no selection. And it is ignore empty constraints. So a constraint is this that we've created. So on page load, a state is deleted. Or if you refresh the page, the states disappear. So by checking this box, it allows me to display just search for all users and ignore this section. If I had to uncheck this, which says you mustn't ignore empty constraints, then we'll have no results. So when we want to start by default, by showing everything on the search, we have to check this box. That will show us all of the unconstrained results. And then we can select from there. How else can we use states? Well, what about showing and hiding different groups? So over here we have users. So I can double click. This is group users. I can start edit the workflow and I can create a new custom state from element actions, set state. I'm going to set it back at page level and I'm going to create a new state. And I'm going to call this view. This is just for my reference. No one else will see that. And I'm just going to use a simple piece of text. And I'm going to actually type in my keypad, users. So when this button is clicked, we're setting an invisible piece of information, and it's just a piece of text, and the text says users. How can we use this? Well, why don't we do this? why don't we say define each border independently, set a right border style of solid, maybe 3, and I'm going to set it to the same color for now. So by default, nothing shows until selection is made. I'm setting to the same color. Okay. And what we'll do is on the conditional tab in group users, we will say that when go find that state we just created, it's called view. When the view is, and then use your keypad users, then do something visual to indicate that users is selected. Why don't we say border color right, green. And if I check here, we have our users. However, before I made a selection, users was actually showing. So this is where it gets interesting, because by default, we can remove all visibility and only show it on a button click. So nothing is showing, and now we're selecting users. Nothing will show just yet because on group users, we have to match the same conditional. We also have to say that when at page level, when the view is users, then this element is visible. So when we click the button, show the group. By default, you can't see the group. Now click here, made the selection, there are users. And now I've got other states to play with. What about clicking across to teams? Here we have teams, and it's not visible on page load. If we go to the conditionals tab, and I say that, what about if the state's view is teams, then show that group. Okay, so that's the view side, but we do have to set up the workflow. We do have to set this up. When we click in that area, then we're going to set state. And it's the same as the previous one. It's at page level. The custom state is called view, but we're going to change the value of that to teams. So I use my keypad, type in teams. When users is selected, change the value of the view custom state to users. And we can do the same thing here on the conditionals tab. We can say that when the state's view is teams, just have to set this up quickly. Right hand side is solid 3, and the default color is the same as the background. I don't want anything showing by default. Okay, that's all set up. So now we can access border color right and change that to green. So I can click users and I can click teams and jump between them. And if I refresh the page, nothing. Now you're probably wondering, well, nothing isn't useful. Can we set a default state in the app itself? And the answer is yes, we can. So we know all of our states are at page level. We know that. So if we bring up the inspector, we inspect the page. My page is called states. This eye icon shows you more information about the page. And what do we have? There are our 2 states, nice and neat at page level. And this input for my view is saying set a default if you like. I'm going to say users, just using my keypad. So now when I refresh the page, that state will kick in and it will show all of the conditional statements that we set up for users. That's the default state. So there will always be a default. You'll never have an instance where there is nothing to show. I can see a slight problem on Teams here. Forgot the S. States aren't just used for showing and hiding information or changing button conditional colors, that kind of thing. They're much more powerful. We can also use states to create lists of data to then later on save through a workflow. If we have a large list and we're allowing users to make selections from that list, we don't have to write to the database for every click. That's a bit of wasted bandwidth in my opinion. What we can do is set a state to save those selections on the page itself and not hit the database yet. And then once the selections have been selected and the person has made up their mind, then we run a single button click to just save that list. So if I check this project button here, what we're going to do is create a project, make a state selection here, and then run on a single button click a workflow to create the project with the name and add the users that we've selected. Now we can't just click on these users now and save them to the database because the project hasn't been created. That's why we need to temporarily create a state list to save those selections, and then during the creation process of the project, that's when we save that list to the project. So what we're going to say is that when we click on a name, we are going to set a state. And this is a slightly different state. I'm just going to call this state, I'm going to save it to the page. I'm going to create a new state and call it members. Better yet, project members. Now, what are they? What is in that repeating group? That repeating group is showing users. And it's showing a list of users. We want to select a list. We can still select one, but ideally it will have more than one. We want flexibility. So I'm creating a new state called project members, which is a list of users. Why is it a list of users? Because we're making a selection from search for user. Okay. So we've defined that we're creating a custom state, which is a list of users, an invisible list that's set to page level. And because it's a list, if you think about a list that exists, we have a list of people, and then we want to add or remove them from that list. So the value, we actually have to point to that list first. The list is here, project members. So we start with this expression. We say the value is this list. If the list doesn't exist, this is part of the creation process as well, okay? And then we have, if you click on the more, we have something called, scroll down, something called plus item. And then we can access current sales user. So take the list and then add current sales user. That's what it's doing. And then how do we show the user that that user is added to this invisible list? Because this list is invisible. Well, we can use this icon here. We can create a conditional that says when that list, that invisible project members list, when that contains the current sales user from this database view here in the repeating group, well then change the icon. Let the user know that a successful selection has been made. Maybe change the color as well. Okay, perfect. Let's try this out. So here is our repeating group and I can make selections. So this is an invisible state list, but we know which ones they are that we are clicking on because we've got this confirmation checkbox. Now, what about deselecting? Because we can select at the moment. And this is where we need to set up, we need to split the workflow in two with a condition. Because at the moment we can only plus item. So I'm going to right click copy and right click paste. So we have two conditions and I'm actually going to color them. We have two conditions pertaining to one action. That one action is clicking on that piece of text. So there's the text there, there's the same text there. For this one, I have set the state to this list plus item current sales user. Very simply, for the opposite one, all we do is change plus item to minus item. Okay, minus item. So remove something from the list that exists. We're not quite finished yet, because we should only be removing something from a list if it is on that list to begin with. So on this only when, what we have to do is say that when that state list contains current sales user, then set the value, then minus that user from that state list. And on this one, we'll say that when that project members list doesn't contain current sales user, then add it to the list. Let's try it. Okay, so we can add, remove, add, remove. Perfect. So at this stage, we have successfully made our selection. Now, how do we actually save that to the database? So we've got our invisible list and we've confirmed it with this check icon. So now we can create the project. First of all, we're going to say create a new thing because we have a state list and a name. So the name is the input, project name's value. And members, now members isn't equal to, members isn't one member. Name is a single thing, it's equal. It's a key value pair. Members is a list. If we look in the database, we have a project. Members is a list of users, and so is our project members state. So what we're going to do is just add list, and then go find that state list, which is project members. If we had an existing list that we wanted to replace, we'd say set list. But we're adding list at the moment. And then I'm just going to close the pop-up. So let's create a new project. Let's call this SEO campaign. And let's add these 3 members. Caleb, no, just add those 3 members. Now we can create the project. And in the database, we now have a new project. And there are our 3 members, SEO campaign and those 3 members. So I have states all over my pages, and it's a very flexible way to be able to capture data in forms and show and hide various bits of data, as well as give feedback when people are clicking on certain elements.